Hey, Crow.
Hello.
Hi. I don't know if you saw this, but when I joined this call just now, I didn't get the standard, this call is being recorded. So I don't know if the auto recording is not working anymore.
It is being recorded, but
Okay.
I didn't get a
You didn't
little
get the prompt.
notice.
Okay. Interesting. All right. I'll ping a friend of mine then.
I bet you know some people.
I do know a friend. I will let them know right now. Um,
Can you guys hear a motor in the background?
that might be mine. Let me take care of that.
No, it's I have a my neighbor is getting his yard sprayed. Can you hear it?
Oh, no, I cannot.
Good. It's very loud to me and disappointing.
For the record, trying to use Teams on my computer completely through pipe wire for a loop.
Yeah, it's a piece of software I get to use.
Yeah.
Randall, did you get the prompt that said this call is being recorded when you joined
Yes.
the call? You did.
And I am on Linux.
Interesting. Okay. Crow, you're on a Mac?
Uh, you know who I work for, right?
Yeah, you work for Red Hat. Doesn't necessarily mean
No,
No.
Oh no, you work for Intel. Well, okay,
right.
yeah. So are you on a Mac?
There's a slight disagreement about microarchitectural philosophy that forbids my company from giving me a non-Intel based computer.
I mean, they're still selling Intel-based Macs.
Are they?
I mean, as of currently, yes. They're still being sold. It's not their current flagship product, but yes, they are still selling Intel-based Macs.
There's a difference in philosophy that my leadership feels that they will go provide me hardware from other friendlier sources.
Organizations. That's fair.
And unfortunately, I get to use a delightful closed source operating system, which they updated over the air last week to me, which scared the hell out of me.
Oh, there is an update available.
They upgraded the whole operating system.
No. Sorry, for Zoom.
From 10 to 11, which scared the hell out of me. Almost 30 years of doing desktop work, and it scared me that you do that over the internet. They're like, oh, it'll be great. Like, no, it's not going to be great.
Yeah.
My computer was slow for a day and a half while it was staging everything.
What version of Zoom are you running, just real quickly, so I can send this thing to the person?
What version of Zoom am I using?
Yeah.
The Zoomiest.
Not necessarily. So just do Zoom and then about, and there should be. Oh, right, you're not a Mac. Help.
I'm on
help.
a delightful.
It should be help, and then like in the
Windows-based system. I'm on version 5.13.3 11,494.
5, 13,
13.3
3. Okay.
on a delightful Redmond-based platform.
Okay.
That I should thank Jay every meeting he joins.
Art, did you get a ping? Did you get a message saying this call is being recorded when you joined the Zoom call?
I did, and I clicked sure.
Okay.
I did get the message.
Nice.
Yeah, because some of us didn't. Krob and I did not, and we should have, I presume.
See, I said his name, and now I'm going to thank you for my operating system, Jay.
Oh,
There you go.
I have no comment. Hey, Jonathan and Crow, you guys might be admins or something and get special treatment.
I don't think so.
All
I'm
right.
part of the LF, but no.
I do log in with power user credentials from time to time. I don't know that it did it this time.
Brian-
Sometimes, Jonathan, it also gets stuck in setting up.
Yeah, Brian, did you get a message when you joined the call saying this call is being recorded or no?
I did not.
Okay. It should have. So it seems like some version of Zoom, or I just sent a message to a friend of mine who works at Zoom saying, "Hey, some versions of Zoom are not getting this prompt on new calls."
I got the prompt.
Okay, well, if
All
we'd
right.
like this, if we want this call recorded, we should probably explicitly.
It is being recorded. It is being recorded, and you
is.
should have gotten the prompt, but you didn't get the prompt, which you should have.
No, in fact, is there a host here? Jonathan, are you host?
Neither of us. I mean, I didn't get the prompt, and I'm not a host.
Okay, yeah, we need the host key in order to record.
Yeah, it looks like I didn't log in with the host credentials this time.
Right.
Well, I did get the prompt.
Yeah, and a bunch of us did.
Okay,
Right.
Then maybe it is automatically recording. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's not assume it gets recorded, but let's hope.
Right.
The worst.
All right, folks. Well, it is 5 after the hour. Welcome to the February 22nd edition of the Vulnerability Disclosures Working Group. I posted a link to the agenda in the chat. Make sure that you mark your attendance on the February 22nd section, not the February 23rd. You're not in the future yet.
I don't know why I have to request access now. I used to not have to. I didn't have to request access in the past.
Yeah, me too. I actually requested it earlier.
I don't know. Let's see. Anyone with a link can view.
Yeah. I can't access it from either my LF account or my personal account.
I
Right,
know.
well, there, I just changed it. Anyone on the internet can edit the document.
There we go.
So I've been asking Kahil to do a little bit of kind of an audit on our meeting notes to try to keep them. I mean, we are a security organization. World writable meeting notes as our decisional framework seems a little bit of an oversight. So I don't know if he made a change related to that, but I wouldn't expect him to make a change that would be disruptive like this. We are also, by the way, having Jordan Harband do an audit of the of our GitHub permissioning and the like. So we're going to be tightening a few things down, which will mean some things like this. But I don't know that this is specifically related to that.
Which is why it's important you give me your contact information so that we can properly set the access control list.
I don't think I can still change my. I still can't sign in.
That's sad. Sad face. All right. Do we have any new friends today that wanted to introduce themselves and say hello to the group?
Rob, do you want me to add sorry, not new person. Do you want me to add the that document to the opens or to the meeting agenda?
You could add it to the agenda,
Okay.
whatever that document is. Do you want to introduce yourself, Noah? Say hi.
Sure. Am I audible?
You are.
You are.
Perfect. So, hello, I'm Noah. I'm working with Open University in the UK, but I'm here in California. Yeah. And I'm working on software evolution, maintenance, and security. And I've coordinated with another researcher from Portugal who suggested the OSSF. And I'm looking forward to getting to be a part of this. I've already done, I think, like a pull request, but I realize that you need to be in these conversations to get vetted and all that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Oh man, and my friend Marcus is here. That's awesome. Guten Tag, Marcus.
Hello.
Do we have anyone that's on the call that is interested in helping us take notes today?
On the subject of notes, I think there's a slight confusion because I think people signed in on the 23 instead of the 22nd.
Right. But I already talked about that because today is the 22nd, not the 23rd.
Just saying.
Being a time lord, I understand that. All right. So if you have any opens, please add them to the open section of the agenda. And do we have anyone that was interested in helping us take notes, please? If not, I'll do my best, but it's hard to talk and type.
I'll try to help, bro.
Thank you, Randall. All right. There is an OpenSSF Secure Critical Projects Virtual Maintainer Summit going on in a little bit. I'll have to step out early, so I don't know if we'll fill up the full hour today, but I got to step out at 1/4 to the hour to go help moderate over there. Just so everyone is aware, there is an official call for papers open for OpenSSF Day North America, which will be held in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I'll be there, and we'll be going out for poutine, everybody. So anyone that wants to be there will have some delicious gravy fries. But more importantly, there's a call for papers for the working groups and SIGs and projects. So we're looking for like not quite a lightning talk, but essentially kind of a short presentations from the different members. So if anyone has a topic of around 15 minutes or so that they wanted to share with the OpenSSF membership, I think this is really important. I'm going to see if Madison wants to streamline. We're going to do a CVD talk. It's under consideration for the larger conference. So maybe we might be able to streamline that down to focus in on the community for OpenSSF Day. But if anyone has any other ideas for talks, please consider submitting them. If you need assistance in massaging your proposal or helping shape it, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm glad to assist, and as we're anyone else in the group will be willing to help out. Any questions about OpenSSF Day Vancouver? Roger Dodger. Let's skip a second. Tomorrow, we're having our second APAC focused vulnerability disclosure meeting. So anyone that is in particularly like West Coast of the States, anyone in Europe, I don't expect you to stay up, but anyone in the States that if you are interested and available, please show up to help us engage with our new friends from around the world. I'm expecting to get a handful of folks from Australia. There's a member project, OSV, that they're kind of the engineers are out of Australia. So they were excited to have some time, a time to collaborate better with the group. So please join us at 6 p.m. Eastern, 2300 UTC for that call. Should be interesting. We had a small turnout last time, but it was a public holiday in Australia. So I expect we'll get a little bit better turnout this time. Anyone that showed up today to talk about OpenVex, unfortunately, Dan 2 is on vacation and Dan 1 is obligated elsewhere, but they committed to be back to talk with us about the upstream OpenVex project and about how we potentially can collaborate together. They'll be back on March 8th. So I'll make sure to make a bunch of noise on the mailing list and Slack so we get good participation for OpenVex Day. Art.
Yeah, I will not get into steal any of that presentation. But I have seen it recently. I've been talking to those folks. I am the lead editor of the CISA community minimum requirements for VEX document. It is almost ready to come out. And I believe was some of the motivation for those guys to go off and create a lean, clean, new, open reference-ish VEX implementation, which is a great idea, despite the grumbling that now we have one more way to do VEX. VEX being as new as it is in the world, I don't see a problem. In fact, I think it's a benefit to have OpenVex, but I'll just sort of say for the group here, CISA community, not CISA proper doc, almost out. It looks like a specification, but it's not, kind of, because people didn't want one. Long story. The joys of community developed documents when people don't agree and they're not working in a standards process. So that was fun. There's a bit of grumbling about yet another VEX format, which again, I think is a good thing in this case, but just to give everyone the heads up, that's some of the backstory. We'll see how the world, likes VEX at all and which flavor of it. But that's just some background, and I'll, leave the OpenVex details to the guys that wrote it. Yeah.
Cool. And they'll be here to talk about their project, their software, and then to see if there's any interest in this group to collaborate and kind of help see if we can get upstream open source to start to publish VEX information. And I know that Jay and I in particular are very excited about the possibility of joining forces to help out. So I think it's going to be a good conversation.
It'd be great if there were a more standard way to convey vulnerability status instead of reading everyone's individual advisory by hand separately.
Wouldn't it be amazing if when a developer was fixing the software and they prepared the materials, there was like something like a GitHub action that automatically generated the VEX advisory and it just went out magically with no extra effort?
In my lifetime, I hope. Yeah, I'm ready for it. Please.
Maybe 2023, man.
All right.
Hey, Art, I was on that call. Art, be careful with the spec talk. I was on that call.
Oh, were you on? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Jay, have you been at Microsoft for like 20 years?
I have not been at Microsoft
Okay.
for 20 years.
All right.
He's only 23, man.
I didn't think so, but sorry, I was hoping I was not. I may have met you before and I was ignoring you and I was going to be a jerk. So I was just checking in case I don't think I've met you before in person. So anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah. No. All right. Yeah, no. So we're all familiar with open, right? Community developed things. The CISA community thing, for what it's worth, there's no voting procedure. There's no official rules. It's sort of, we're making it up as we go. There was some contention, but here we are. So yeah.
You don't need to make it up as you go. There are people who figured some of this stuff out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. No.
But I'm sure it's CISA that's kind of driving some of this, and yeah, a lot of it.
I would say the simplest thing is that there are a lot of factors, and yeah. So making it up as we go, yes, but I'll some of the folks involved, and myself included, partly do have experience in actual standards body development and things. So we tried to bring in, towards the end, as we weren't agreeing, we're like, look, IETF has some stuff. Let's follow what they say. And there's discussion if this VEX thing, works out, that the spec should probably live somewhere real, right? A standards organization where you can track changes and there's an official process. And if somebody gets disagreed with, it's on record and it's all above board, and there's no money involved for members. Yeah, anyway.
And there's a couple of other efforts at OpenSSF that are standards tracks. We could do mini standards efforts using a pretty lightweight process at Linux Foundation projects that allow us to actually fast track it to become ISO standards. We can be a pass.
Oh yeah.
Publicly available standard submitter to ISO.
As PDX went up. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And
No,
there'll be a couple of other things in OpenSSF following that direction, possibly Vex, we hope. But
no, great.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, Art. I just wanted to make a comment. I was gonna, since Krob said that this is gonna be next week, I was gonna hold the comments,
Sorry.
but just
Sorry.
no, yeah. I mean, so since you brought it up, right?
Right.
The concern I have, so I get your point. Vex is very new. It's expected. To me, that's actually the very reason that we as a community should be trying to limit the number of competing implementations. The biggest problem we have in the space right now is the confusion around what am I supposed to go do, because there's so many different ways to do everything. And, and just Ari, the conversation that we had in Slack, I completely get and support the idea that, it's up to the market to decide what wins and what not. But I have a bigger concern if the idea is that this project and another competing Vex implementation would all of a sudden come in as an OpenSSF project. I would actually be quite concerned about that at this point, because it's basically giving a round of endorsement to this brand new thing when there's these other brand new things that haven't even had any chance to do anything yet, really. And to me, it's just creating mess. It's just really creating mess in the space.
Jay.
Yeah, so, well, this is in response to Jason, but also then to create kind of a dare I say, a separation of church and state with it, right? So Jason, just offhand, there's a couple of communities that are working on spec type stuff, like for instance, what Art just mentioned, which is minimum requirements, which in itself could be a spec of sorts, right? That not going to adjudicate that. There could be another organization creating maybe a larger, more detailed definition of what it is. Those things can often compete with one another. But I think what we're talking about here when it comes to OpenVex is the tooling around Vex document creation. And then what Krob is talking about, the stuff that he and I are talking about is kind of like a Vex advisory. So past just the tooling that creates a Vex document, how does that tool receive the information it needs in an open environment to properly to get that information it needs in an open environment to create that documentation for open source components and repos that might have vulnerabilities that maybe perhaps a consumer of open source components could better understand, like, hey, these components have vulnerabilities that are identified, they've been identified in Vex documentation. So if you take the ball and you follow the bouncing ball, there's room to play for everyone in this, and everyone has the right idea. Consolidation of efforts is probably the name of the game, but where should those efforts be consolidated?
Yeah, and Jay, to be clear, I am a extremely arduous supporter of tools, and we have a desperate need for more tools in this space. My issue isn't with the OpenVex tools, it's that they created a new format to go with the tool. That's my primary concern.
So I'll tell you, the same people that are in OpenVex around the formatting around that are some of the same people that are in the CISA working group. So the difference in the separation you think that's there is not necessarily there. These communities are working in concert with one another, and where we're sitting with it is saying, excellent, you guys do that. We're not going to do that. You do that. What we're going to do here is maybe bring the tooling here so we can work on it as a community, and then at the same time work on Vex advisory that could go into the tooling to produce better results on behalf of open source you guys know what the hell I'm talking about, software creators and maintainers who may want that VEX documentation created in a centralized location and not have to go reach everything. Hell, we could even be partnering with someone like a project like Alpha and Omega who does stuff on the other side of that too, right? There's a plethora of ways we can go, but we can do that right here in the OpenSSF because that's what this is set up to do, right? I mean, so I would say mindset, expand the mind and get creative. We can get creative as hell with this, and I think that's the beauty of all of these different communities working on. We can get creative as hell and realize a lot of these people are in the same rooms that are doing all of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've been extremely deeply involved in this. This is a working group. I've been in a couple of the meetings, and I've been following this for literally 2 years. So I guess all I'm saying is when we as communities create tools that do not interoperate out of the box in these brand new efforts, it is not helping anything. So there is something to be said for, I agree, there is something to be said with the idea of, let's plant many seeds and may the best one grow largest, or whatever the heck the analogy is. I'm losing my mind right now. But there's also something to be said for interoperability, especially in a space that we're trying to make any kind of headway at all. And the more confusion we create, the more tools that don't talk to each other out of the box, because Group A created one format and Group B created another format, and then the cybersecurity, this other subset of the industry is aligning on this other format, and nothing actually interoperates. And then you got to create a whole bunch of middleware to do translation of everything. It's just, I don't get it. I don't get why we would go down that path because somebody doesn't like the way that some JSON is laid out. It's really, I don't get it.
Brian.
Yeah, I really sympathize, Jason, and I think the tone that you're going to find set inside the OpenSSF across a lot of different efforts increasingly this year is going to be kind of the opposite of what you find at some projects like CNCF or Apache or others, where it's like, hey, let 1,000 flowers bloom, where there's really a desire to figure out what is the best answer to a given problem, and then how do these best answers fit together to create kind of the best, tool suite, the best combination, the best thing that we can go out and recommend that all the different communities adopt and companies adopt for their own tool chains and their own development processes. So I'll just speak wearing my general manager hat of OpenSSF, very interested in trying to reduce the amount of confusion in the market, reduce the amount of duplication of effort, and drive for convergence. And I'll play a little bit of a geezer card for a moment, which is back in 1995, as we were working on the Apache web server, there was a tremendous amount of overlap between the people working on that code and the HTTP code and those writing the HTTP specification at the IETF. Roy Fielding was a core maintainer and the chief editor, right? And this resonance and this tight iteration loop, tight innovation loop between the standards development process, which it should be slow. You should write a document that can last for the ages, right, and update it at most once every couple of years or whatever. And the tighter kind of frequent release. Let's try some things. Let's mark things X dash whatever, that you get with software. But you want to really connect the communities, and both of those communities need to be as open and inclusive, and bringing in people with different views and try to find the kind of greatest common denominator to get to something that actually will get the greatest adoption, like HTTP arguably did over Gopher or FTP or whatever. And so I really hope here, and by the way, I do not want to pressure you or anyone else to say that standards process has to happen at OpenSSF. We really do have to be driven by what the folks involved in those communities feel is the best direction, which sometimes is in conflict with that first goal of convergence, right? But I'll just speak up at the end for two things. One is we have a pretty lightweight process to manage the IP that is very kind of GitHub centered. That I forget the URL that goes and describes that, but it's basically what it makes sure that all the stuff that standards bodies like to see around IP, which is different from what open source requires, are taken care of, so that you can actually take that standard and take it to a place like ISO. Now, I'm not a big fan of ISO. There is paywalls for some of the standards there. The stuff that we pushed ISO, as I understood it, does not require then payment at any point, even through ISO. But the cool thing about it getting an ISO standard is then governments of the world seem much more likely to attach regulation to ISO standards than to, say, IATF standards, or just things they found on the web that look like they have consensus, right? So sometimes some of the things we're coming up with, we're going to want CISA and other bodies to adopt as recommended or required standards, even in the long term, right? When they get settled, when everyone agrees that they're a good thing. And so that would be my pitch for any process that ultimately can lead to something with the referenceability of an ISO standard. Sorry to make this long.
Oh, no. And before I pop over to Art, I just want to mention the reason that I brought this to the group is because I feel very strongly that this is something that is important for maintainers to figure out how to produce very frictionlessly. And I think it has the possibility to add a substantial amount of value. We have a lot of open source and security expertise here, and I think we could definitely help collaborate to be involved in that standards process and be helped to broker some conversations and try to make some positive moves forward and actually do something and help add some value to the security community. And potentially the OpenVex implementation may not be exactly the best way, but ideally it's going to kickstart us into a conversation where we can start to have that, and we can, I think, as a group, potentially participate more in those conversations. All right. Any other comments on OpenVex? Come back in 2 weeks. It'll be a great chat.
Oh, 2 weeks. Yeah. Hey, sorry, a few more minutes. I'll be
Please.
I'll try to be brief.
Since I was there in the inaugural sharing of Vex many years ago, I'll be glad to yield the floor to Mr. Mannion.
No, just kind of, so looping back on the last couple of comments and speakers, if I had to pick, I remain sort of pro OpenVex, but I want to be clear, it's also not great. Of course, it's not black and white. That's awesome and the perfect thing, and we absolutely need that. It's got downside, obviously, right? Confusion, interop, standardization, right? My sort of big picture view is it's really just so early in the Vex. I forget the name of the idea cycle, right? We have here, I'll just spell it out, right? CSAF, a advisory format, sort of has Vex added into that. Cyclone DX does Vex in a sort of a different way, and I've not sorted this out. Cyclone DX has a bit of a commercial interest thing going on that I don't quite understand, but there's something going on there. No judgment, I'm just saying these are some of the factors involved, right? I heard from a prominent SPDX developer that SPDX was sort of going to wait for the sysadoc to come out before running off and doing anything. And then OpenVex, came along. And again, I fully agree there are issues with multiple standards, interop, all that stuff. It's not a pleasant situation to be in. But we're sort of writing something down before it's even in widespread use, right? And I'm aware of some of the CSAF implementations out there. I don't know how much Vex is in CDX, but it's not a lot. It's not widely adopted yet. It's not widely in use. And I think, as many of us probably have experienced, right, actual use is going to then inform what's actually working. And then you go write or rewrite the spec to match what's actually working in the real world. So I think we're just a little early, and that's why all this sort of confusion and contention is going on. And again, what puts me over the line on being pro OpenVex is the other implementations are bulkier and bigger and do more things. And having a clean reference implementation I think, will be beneficial in the long run. I'm not saying it's not it's a perfect solution and it's not adding confusion, but having the reference one, if that's where they're going, I think will be helpful. And yeah, a standards home absolutely at an appropriate time. And yeah, Brian, thanks. I hadn't really thought of Ella for OpenSSF, but that's a great option as well. And I'll make sure that gets into the mix in the SISTA discussion. Out. All right.
Before I turn it over to Jonathan, a quick update. At the TAC yesterday, we had 4 members that expressed a desire to recommend moving the OSS CERT plan forward to the governing board. So yay, they liked our stuff. We need, the foundation needs to develop a process with which to ingest and adjudicate that. So I'll be talking with the governing board TAC governance committee later this week about the proposals. So ideally, we'll get some instruction about what next steps will be. I think it's definitely going to need to be some type of executive style presentation to present to the GB members, but we'll suss all that out in the coming days and weeks. So I will probably be coming back to this group for some assistance in developing a delightful presentation, like 4 slides that kind of distills down the key points of what we want to do and costs, and summarizes the plan a little bit for kind of an executive set of eyes. So stay tuned. And, initially good support. We'll see how this progresses, and I'll let everybody know as that moves forward. And then we'll be setting up calls for the CVD guide for consumers soon. So if you want to pre-stage information from like the table of contents, we're taking suggestions on our TOC for topics that should be covered under such a document. And I will send out a cattle call to get everybody participating in writing that document. And hopefully we can get that delivered by, my target would be like end of summer, maybe. We'll see. So now any questions on either of those two? All right, Jonathan, let's talk about your document. And then again, I'm going to scoot out of here in about 10 minutes. But you all continue free to go on till the top of the hour.
Hey, yeah, perfect. So I wrote up a document. Mostly, it started as a copy paste from Google's policy around vulnerability disclosure, but has been heavily modified since then. It is the Open Source Security Foundation. It is a proposal and a proposed policy for the Open Source Security Foundation vulnerability disclosure policy. So the policy for how we will disclose vulnerabilities, outgoing vulnerabilities to maintainers of open source projects, and if we ever run into vulnerabilities in corporate projects that are closed source, because sometimes that happens through the course of vulnerability research, how we will reach out to those. Well, no, not the process. This is the policy, not the process document. So it describes the policy under which we will disclose vulnerabilities. I sent it to the Slack channel and via email, and I asked you all to take a look at it. For the people who have looked at it and reviewed it, do you have any verbal feedback that you want to provide here?
I have not had time to read it. My real job is bothering me. So, but I will devote some time tomorrow morning to give you notes.
Okay.
And I might suggest maybe we do an official 2-week call for comments, and then send that out to the mailing list and the Slack saying this is official. We need your feedback. You have a deadline of X or Y date, and then we will adjudicate things afterwards.
I did send it out to the Slack end of the but yes, yeah, sure, and that makes sense. Giving a deadline.
Yeah.
There is already feedback in the document. If you can use your logged in Google account when you leave comments, that would be helpful, because that would mean that I can see who you actually are and we can have a conversation there. I see a couple of anonymous auditors and yada yada yada. Yeah, so at a high level, this is 2 documents. It's not 2 documents, but it's got 2 subsections: the manual disclosure policy, which is how we will go about reporting vulnerabilities to individual projects, and then also a blurb basically calling out that there will be a policy for disclosing vulnerabilities at scale across open source with automation. We don't really have those policies and processes in place. Those policies and processes will be established under a SIG that I'm standing up. But those will be handled differently. Just basically, it's a call out to those things will be handled differently. Yeah.
So group, what are your thoughts?
Don't all jump at once.
I have, to be honest, I have only barely skimmed, but since Jonathan wrote it, he knows what the F he's doing. I'm comfortable adopting it as is, honestly. You know, if we get a couple in, we'll figure out any changes that need to be made. Seriously, a handful of us in here know this business very well. I'm not really concerned. So how's that for an honest answer?
I appreciate your.
I did skim it. I mean, I gave it a decent skim, but didn't read too carefully. But I do trust that you wrote a good one. So
yeah.
The only part I haven't seen, Jonathan, if you made any updates in the past couple of days or not. The only comment that I had at all was the part around, you know, how clear we were going to be around, you know, the word patch, because I found it was kind of overly ambiguous, and we could probably make it a lot clearer given what we're trying to do. But
Sorry,
I don't know if you might have already made an update that I haven't read.
the term patch, you mean?
Yeah. So, and just I'll just outline here in case people didn't read my thread in the past. So, my only concern was around, like, you know, when we say in the policy, we can disclose the vulnerability after a patch has been released. To me, it wasn't clear if we're talking about, okay, the fix is available in the open source repo, or the fix has been upstreamed to package delivery systems, or it's now available in the software. Like, what do we mean by patch? Is it when the code is available on GitHub? Is it when it's downstream in Red Hat and everyone else? Like that was my main question. I found it was kind of ambiguous, and I think in some other ones like Google's, it's purposefully ambiguous, but I would kind of like it to be more clear myself. But
yeah, so I think that the term patch is intentionally ambiguous because it can mean different things for different ecosystems, right? For a C package, right, it may just be that a patch is available because the downstream consumers are consuming source. A patch being available for a Java project most likely means that a new release of that jar has been published to Maven Central, right? And so because that is so ecosystem dependent that it may be hard to classify it, like all the different edge cases, but when you're talking about a specific ecosystem and you're talking with the maintainers, you can probably all agree upon what a patch being available means.
so what should we be trying to do then, since we're trying to cover so many different potential ecosystems?
Ambiguity and assume good intent. I mean,
yeah, I never assume good intent.
that's fair.
When lawyers get involved in these things, that's what I worry about.
Yeah, there's I mean, there was other wording that I saw that is not in here, but it was about a patch being made widely available, and so that would be, or it was available to consumers or something like that, and that would imply it being in a state where it could actually be consumed. So that would limit the scope of it being available in source repository if in the source repository, if that's not how the artifact is consumed, right? If it's consumed that way for Go repos, like Go for example, they're depending upon the Git repository as the source, right? And compiling against that, that may be sufficient. But for a project that, sure, they've put the patch into the source code, but they've merged that change, but they haven't necessarily published a release yet, then that wording may, right? So communicating in some way, like a patch widely available to consumers.
Yeah. The only other way I could think that we might be able to handle it would be to just like add some time pad to the source repo. Like, you know, the maximum window would be when the code is actually in the repo plus 1 week or something, so that you give them time to do it.
The problem with that is that source code, like the problem with that for critical security vulnerabilities is that there are actors scanning Git repository feeds and auditing them and determining whether or not a vulnerability has been patched but not announced yet, right? And so if you give that week, you're giving a week of no information being published about the vulnerability, but the actors that are, you know, bad actors can consume that knowledge and make those decisions. So I don't like putting in like weak sort of gaps like that built into the system. Yeah, silent fix isn't really silent. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's no yeah. There's no good answer, because if they are scanning that, like you're saying, which we know happens, like, you know, even the hour isn't going to matter, right?
Well, I mean, there is a lead time between identifying a vulnerability and creating an exploit, right? That being said, depending upon how critical the vulnerability is, that lead time may be smaller and smaller and smaller. So, but you're right that, you know, even an hour can be too much at times, right? I mean, I don't have real data around this particular question, but I know that you want to minimize that time of the fix is public to it actually getting out to consumers in a way that they can actually consume it.
So Jonathan, I would, now that the alarm goes off, I would suggest let's do a formal email to the mailing list and Slack, formally requesting comments. Let's give it till our next, put the deadline before March, make it March 6th, so that in our, that gives you time to kind of review it, and then we can come back to the working group call and talk about it. And then you'll probably need to talk to Brian or David Wheeler. I imagine since it has the P word in the title, you'll want LF Legal to take a look at it before anything gets published and whatnot. But I think that gives, we want to make sure we get the community, you know, the capitalize on our group's expertise. I'll mention this in the APAC call tomorrow, so maybe we'll get some additional feedback. And, you know, as you know, Art put in some suggestions on wording, you know, Jason, you know, talked about his reservations around the word fix. So we might get some additional good nuggets to make this even better, but that's what I would suggest.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I have reservations. I was just raising it as a comment. I wouldn't hold up this work at all based on that. I think to Art's point, you know, it's a living document and we can evolve it if learnings show that, hey, we need to put more scope around patch, we could do that. But because that was literally the only thing that jumped out at me.
Right. Art, you used to work for CERT, right? So Google's policy has if deadline is due to expire on a weekend or a US holiday, the deadline will be moved to the next normal workday. And I got a bit of feedback on that saying, well, what about if the maintainer's in a different country and they have their own set of holidays and yada, yada, yada.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, if you got the complete global list, there's no good day to release anything. So, you know, when I try to write this down, it looks a little wishy-washy, but I'd suggest this is actually a good place for, you know, reasonable attempt to hit core, core working times and hours of most of the community involved, or most of the user base. You can't do better than that. You're always going to get someone's holiday, someone's time zone problem. But do the best you can, and we can write it better than do the best you can, but make reasonable attempts to accommodate the majority of downstream concerned stakeholders. And then you can have a list of like things to consider: time zones, holidays, weekends, and big blocks matter, right? You can't, if you've got, right, there are blocks where entire countries are out of business for a couple of weeks. You want to try to dodge obvious things, right? Anyway.
All right, I need to bounce. Brian, and then Jonathan, if you could keep an eye on hands up and close out the call for us, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll do.
Thanks all.
Bye, Crow.
Thanks. I happy to also get legal review early on this. I don't know that LF Legal really has folks who've been a part of reviewing similar vulnerability disclosure processes in the past. And so if anybody has a recommendation for a lawyer that they have worked with on these kinds of things, or that they trust to understand the balance of interests in disclosure and how to minimize liability for everybody, I think it's a fairly niche sector. So I'm willing to pay for that amount of time for that specialty, rather than just go to our stock legal team, who would have a whole lot of learning to do to come up to speed.
Are you looking for a lawyer specifically, or somebody who's very familiar with the space?
A lawyer, credentialed and with hopefully with some background, who then I can go to LF Legal and say, here's somebody whose opinions I think you can trust. And obviously they'd want to be able to make that independent judgment too, but because ultimately they will want to weigh in on this, but I'd rather have them outsource this than try to train them on all the different issues.
I will ping Katie Masuris and ask her if she has a lawyer she would recommend, because she'd be the person that I'd suggest we run this by. But if we want a lawyer to review this, then I can ask her to suggest someone.
Okay. There's also a question for the others in the room.
Yeah, Brian, this goes directly counter to what you just said. I spent years working with my internal legal at the time to quote unquote train them, which led to functional results. We occasionally had some outside counsel, but it was a long time ago, and I don't know anyone off the top of my head.
This is trainable then, in your opinion?
I was going to say, I think it is. I'd be happy. I'm happy to be involved in that conversation. I've gone through that before with different folks. I think it is probably, they get the. Anyway, I think it's possible.
And our lawyers are really sharp, and they probably are offended if they heard me say this. So they'd probably be happy to take it on. I just wanted to know if they're even like somebody with an hour or two of it with a JD next to their name who.
Yeah, I don't know anyone, but if the lawyers that have understand internet and technical stuff, which a lot do these days, and I bet the LFs do. I think it's probably achievable, but that's just an opinion. So yeah.
Okay, thanks, Art.
Aren't you on the board of the EFF?
Yes, I am. And yes, we have folks like Ava Galperin and other and lawyers. Actually, I was just more of an advocate, but yeah, certainly have other means. I just wanted to tap the expertise of the folks in the room.
Yeah.
By the way, the board members are not supposed to ask for free legal services from their own organizations.
That's great. That's very fair. I respect that. Okay, were there any other, the other topic that was listed, so before we move on, are there any other points, or anybody else want to bring anything else up about this document in particular? Going once, going twice. So, okay. The final point in the meeting agenda that I wanted to bring up real fast was I am establishing a SIG around auto fixing of vulnerabilities across open source. The meeting time has been selected. I'm about to send an email to operations at the OpenSSF to add that to the calendar. It's going to be from Wednesdays from 4 to 5 p.m. EST starting next week. So it'll be a SIG underneath the vulnerability disclosure working group discussing standards and policies and processes around fixing vulnerabilities at scale across open source. So if you would like to participate and join, that's when it'll be, and it'll be a bi-weekly meeting. So that is issue number 123 under the vulnerability disclosures working group. Yeah, any points, questions, concerns, issues with that? Going once, going twice. So, with that, is there any other points that any other topics that anybody wants to bring up before we close out the meeting? Alrighty then, I guess that I will give you all back the 8 minutes that your final 8 minutes of this call. Thank you all for coming, and I will see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone's right.
Thank you.